if you're not like working on your life outside of filmmaking, then you're going to come to LA, you're going to knock on the door of the industry, you're probably going to get shut out for an extended amount of time, and then you're going to hate being in LA, right? You have to enjoy the place that you live. Like Karis and I, we wanted to live in LA. So even though, we are connected to the industry, we try to like experience the town and the surrounding areas in a way that allows us to forget about the film industry, right?
There has got to be more than this.
Spencer Glover.
Yes.
Thank you, brother, for making some time to come over and talk to us.
Dude, thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, me too.
Ever since I knew you were coming back to town.
Here I am. I'm back in the flesh.
Yes. Last time we saw each other, you were filming, it was just about this time last year, a project for a winery, I want to say.
Yeah, Boal Vineyards.
Boal Vineyards.
Yeah.
And that was like a contest that people submitted a screen.
Yeah, so Boal Vineyards, they have, there's, I guess, some story that one of their vineyards is haunted. And so they have an annual short story competition. The winning short, their short gets turned into a film. And they're the wine sponsor at Austin Film Festival, so it automatically plays there. And it's just like a fun little circle of creativity.
Yeah, that's great. So the film that you guys made, did it premiere?
Yeah. Last year at Austin was great. Full crowd. Lot of laughs at the end of it. We weren't intending for it to be funny, but the final moment, after we watched a couple cuts, we were like, yeah, let's just let it live how it needs to live. Yeah. It was like poking fun at just like rental prices and living in. It was set in LA, but we filmed it here in Nashville, and we were just poking fun at like the crazy amounts of rent that we pay. Basically saying like, what would it cost for you to live with a ghost? like what number would it take for you to move in? And so we were just poking fun at that. And like, there's this one moment in the film, and Joy, I'm forgetting her last name. Joy. I'm sorry.
Joy Todd.
Yeah. Yes, Joy Todd.
Actress.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Joy. She has this line where she's like, it's only 2,200 with a ghost, or I'm paraphrasing the line, but it got like a big laugh, and we just like let it live the way it needed to live. So
I mean,
it was fun.
Testament to the fact that you're speaking to an audience that like gets it.
Yeah, right.
We all do.
Yeah, prices are crazy.
Well, that's awesome that you got to premiere it at the film festival. Awesome in Austin, and that it was a packed house.
Yeah,
you don't get to watch movies in packed houses as much as we used to.
Yeah,
and one of the I was at South by, I'm name dropping festivals over here, earlier this year, not for our film Morse Code, but just to be there, and for other reasons. And we went to a bunch of premieres, and the energy that comes from a full packed theater, like not an empty seat in the house, is so cool. We saw that for a couple of films, but one was the Black Keys documentary, where it was just like a packed house, and everybody was seeing it for the first time. And it reminded me of like back in the 90s when I went to go see Interview with a Vampire with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, and it was at the like mall cinema, and like we were all there for and it was the same idea. And that's just something, there's a few things that have changed in the industry, maybe not for the better, but one of those is the absence of packed theaters.
Yeah, I miss that feeling so much. And even just like, everyone has access to trailers now so much earlier, and like you don't go to the theater to like watch the previews anymore. Like you're either seeing it on YouTube like weeks before, or you're just showing up like, 30 minutes past the actual screening time to miss the previews. And that's like a weird thing. Like I like sitting and watching the trailers before the movies. Like that was the thing,
Yeah. I remember reading an article in Variety or something that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
There's some like op-ed about how trailers are getting too long. It's just like people are starting to complain, these 5-minute trailers. And now it's like trailers are almost the thing of the past.
I know, right? Yeah. Crazy times.
Well, okay. So let's talk about your illustrious career, young man. You have done quite well for yourself since the time that we first met, which is, I think that maybe, I don't think you were still going to school, but you were a talented local filmmaker, and then you had a pretty significant break.
Mhm.
And I'd love to talk a little bit about that experience because
Yeah.
I don't know a ton beyond what you've shared on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
But you were selected among 2,000 people. I'm going from memory, so correct me where I get it wrong. But there's like 2,000 applicants for this really competitive
Fellowship.
and called Disney Launchpad.
Yep.
Right. And how many directors, young directors, did they end up selecting?
So this was second season. So we had 6 directors and 5 writers. One of them was a writer director. So altogether 11 people. Yeah.
So you were the recipient of the Disney Launchpad Fellowship. Is that the official title?
Yeah.
Man, incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
And what a learning experience that must have been.
Oh my goodness. You're actually catching me at a really interesting time because it's been almost 2 years since I did the program, 1 year since the release. And I'm experiencing so many different feelings around filmmaking and like my career in general. So first, thank you for acknowledging that. It really was a great experience. I mean, like you're thrust into, one of the biggest storytelling canons in entertainment, right? And you get to work with like executives at the top level and get feedback from folks that you normally wouldn't be able to get feedback from, excuse me. But it was just a great program. I feel so much more confident and able to work in the studio system. I think the leftover residue is that, and this is just me being vulnerable, but just as a creative, I feel like I'm searching for myself again, because you dedicate 2 years of your life to making this thing with so many people and for a really large audience. I mean, this was going on Disney Plus at the end of it, right? It's up there now. You can stream it. Disney Plus, Black Belts.
Black Belts on Disney Plus. Yeah, you check it out now.
Plus, yeah.
We'll put the link up on the YouTube screen in the comments.
Yeah. But you put so much energy into like making this thing, and you have a sort of like commercial sensibility to it that you have to hit because you're working with executives and they have
those are the expectations.
Yeah, that's the expectations, right? So you dedicate so much time to that, and then when it's out in the world, you release it, you let it go, you get this thing called industry brain. And so during the program, we got to speak with so many filmmakers, and one of them was Barry Jenkins. We had a call with him, and he got on the call and was talking
Tell
about
me who he is. Or,
Barry Jenkins.
I know, but maybe some of
director of Moonlight, Medicine for Melancholy, amazing director. I think he's doing the new Lion King right now.
Wow.
So he got on the call with us and spoke with us for about an hour. And
how many people are on this call?
It was probably about 15.
Okay.
Yeah, 15
so that's
folks.
already crazy.
Yeah. So it's like some dedicated time with him. We got to ask him questions and like, just talk about everything that we wanted to talk about.
Was this for Black Belts specifically?
No, it was for the
entire
for the entire cohort. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. So
no. It's all good. It's all good. It was a crazy experience, but he was talking about his time as a director and how he did Medicine for Melancholy. I think it was 2000 and I'm forgetting now, maybe 2008 or so. But after he made that, he had some success with the film, did the festival circuits, got some heat around him. And then he fell into this industry brain trap where he was focused on what does the studio want next? What does the audience want to see next? He was like writing towards that thing. And for 10 years, he couldn't get anything done. And he eventually stepped away from that and did Moonlight and then took off from there. So in a weird way, the same thing ended up happening. Even though we heard the advice, for me at least, after I finished the program, I was like, man, I gotta strike while the iron's hot. I gotta hit up all these executives and take all these meetings and
I mean, everybody feels that pressure. Like, you get an award for anything, you're like, it's not gonna last forever. I'm right now. What's next?
Yeah,
actors do it, directors do it. Every single person in the freelance business does that.
Yeah. And so it was, especially coming out of like the strike and all these things going on. It was like, it was hard for a minute to accept that like I did this big thing and I went to like this like mini mountaintop of a thing,
Yeah.
and to come off of it and not know what to do next was like kind of like soul crushing in a way, And so I'm actively trying to find myself again and like find the creative that just enjoys like making movies and making films and telling stories. So
did you feel like coming out of the other side of that project, which 2 years lasting, well, maybe like a year in the fellowship program formally, and by the end of that first year, you'd made black belts? Is that fair to say?
So we shot, this is 2022. We shot black belts in July of 2022. We did post the rest of that year, and then we had to wait almost another year for it to come out. So that time in between locking picture and getting everything squared away, it was just a bunch of waiting from January 23 to like September 23, just waiting and not knowing when it was going to come out, right? So I was trying to take like so many meetings and set up all these different calls. And
I was gonna say, because that's kind of a great place to be.
Yeah.
The promise, the young promise. It's coming out. We've made it. So so you tried to take advantage of that as much as possible.
I did. I mean, and I met a lot of great people. I've built a lot of relationships, and I think they'll pay off down the road. But it was a lot of no's too. I think it was sort of eye opening to feel that.
You would, because you would think like as the Launchpad recipient, the young man, like somebody huge has already vouched for you,
right?
And you would think that would open a lot of doors. So I'm surprised to hear that.
Well, and that's why I said I think you're catching me at an interesting time because I'm just sort of like reviewing what has happened, and I'm not like mad at it or sad about it. I'm just being honest and vulnerable about it. Sometimes you get to that mountaintop and nothing happens on the other end. What do you do after that? So, and I think that naturally I'm just trying to find myself again in this creative process. So, again, like amazing program. Like it's one of the best programs out there. I think if you have the material and you feel ready for that type of program, you should definitely apply. Because again, it's like so many people, well, I'll tell you. So I'm thinking about post for the film, right? We wrap shooting and we're going into the edit bay, and the first week, I think I just had maybe a call with my editor, Alex Ivany, great editor. Just talk with him about what I was thinking about the film and like how I wanted it to flow, and then he went off for maybe about a week and a half and did his own thing, and came to the studio to watch the first cut. And we're sitting in this little small room. It's me, Alex, and our assistant editor. And
so you haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it at this point. I've seen dailies because at the end of the day they send out the dailies, and I'm like watching little clips and stuff.
But as far as an edit,
nothing. Hadn't seen anything. And he dims the lights and he hits play, and the logo comes up, the Disney logo. The little shooting star. And I'm sitting there like watching this TV and my eyes are like watering, and I'm like, like, oh my God, my heart is gonna explode.
Yeah.
And it was I'm like, I have chills thinking about it right now. It was such a cool feeling to watch your film with that logo on there.
100%.
And just have that experience. I mean, we grew up with that logo, right? We
Yeah,
grew up seeing
exactly.
it. Yeah.
I think Aladdin, I think
Yeah.
little kid, I think Fox and the Hound.
Right. Yeah. So it's like,
what a legacy.
Yeah. To see that, I'm like reminded of that moment, seeing that logo come up and just feeling like, man, in a way, I'm like, I made it.
Yeah.
But also it's like, there's so much more to do. So,
I mean, when you're doing something like this, something so uncertain, like a career in film, the only way I'll just speak for myself, or a lot of us perhaps are plagued with self-doubt along the way.
Yeah.
And the only clue that you're not a complete moron is that you get these little boosts now and
Yeah.
then, and they're critical. They're that's what separates. That's what makes you feel like, okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty huge one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear that, being on the other side of it, you're like, okay, it's maybe in the past a little bit. now.
Yeah,
And so like,
yeah.
what are we doing next?
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I talk about this with a lot of my friends. So I was trying to put it into an analogy that I could understand. And like, I love sports. I grew up watching a lot of sports, but I was thinking about this film and this program, like this program and me doing it and making this film was like one of my trips to the Super Bowl, right? So
Yeah.
you go to the Super Bowl, you win or lose, you go back the next season, you train, you work again, and you try again, right? And so I'm in this space where like I see Disney Launchpad and Black Belts as like one of my trips to Super Bowl. In the time in between like my next project and that Super Bowl, like what am I doing in between? Like how am I practicing, right?
Yeah.
Like what am I going to do to make sure that I'm ready for the next opportunity at the Super Bowl, right? And so I'm constantly like trying to figure out like what can I create and not think about the industry, not think about, how can I get into this big festival, what the market wants. I genuinely want to get back to a place where I'm just creating because I love a story and feel super passionate about it. And that's not to say that I felt super passionate about Black Belts while making it. There was so much like passion and love that came out of the story, and I'm super proud of it. But like we said earlier, there are commercial expectations that you need to hit. So, but now I'm like, I feel a sense of freedom in a way. Like I can just get back to making stuff that I want to make. And that's really fun and freeing for me.
I want to talk about the writing from the free place, because I think that's a major part of the theme of this pod.
Yeah.
Just independent art in general.
Yeah.
But maybe in getting there, it might be interesting to talk about your experience working in that under that the auspices of Disney, with the collaborative element, even in the writing process from an early age. I imagine that like sometimes it was awesome and sometimes it was like feeling like you're having to compromise. Or I don't know, I'm speculating here, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, no, of course. I think with any fellowship, there's always challenges, and so I did not have the original idea for Black Belt. So when I was accepted into the program, I had to pitch on this script. So by like the second interview, the team at Launchpad, they said, "Hey, we've got this one story. We think you'd be great for it. Read it. Let us know if you're interested, and then if you are, we'll set up another meeting and you can pitch for it." So I had to like win the project. And so when I got it, it was, martial arts. It was, Black martial arts. It was Compton. I was like, I'm into that. I want to try this. Right.
Yeah.
So I created this whole pitch deck and had my whole little spiel. Pitched it to him. It was maybe a meeting of like 12 people, some executives in the Launchpad team. And I didn't know at the time that those executives would become my mentors in the project. So it was already sort of like the plan was working.
Is this on Zoom? Is this
this was on Zoom. Yeah, we were still like pretty heavy in the COVID era. So we start, I get picked for the project and then we start the development process. So development was maybe 4 months before we shot. And it started as just sort of like this homage to like, blaxploitation films and kung fu films that we love. The writer and I, Xavier Styles is the writer. Shout out to him. He had the original idea, but it sort of quickly like morphed into just this conversation about like what masculinity looks like today, and just how we should let go of certain ideas about what men should be. I think like the 80s was full of like toxic masculinity, and like everything was Rambo and guys oiled up shooting guns, and I just wanted to explore just a different side of what masculinity could look like. So the story ended up being about a Black father and son reconnecting through martial arts. And he's basically like stealing a family technique to go win a fight. And by the end of it, he realizes that, fighting isn't the real, answer to any of your problems. So through that development process, we had to like write, a new draft like every 2 weeks. We had, meetings with our mentors, and they would like, give us tons of notes on the script. And I think what was interesting about it was understanding that this also goes to the filmmaking process too. If you're doing this thing, there's a part of you that knows what you're doing, right? There's a piece of you that has all the little elements that you need to get it done. And then there's the self-doubt part, right? So it's like trying to find the balance between those two in these meetings, because you want to be open to the collaborative process and hear notes, hear feedback, and make your story better. But then you also want to say like, hey, I've done this a couple times before and I know that this thing will work. So a lot of the meetings were about trying to like find that balance of, this is me, this is like my story and how I want to tell it, but also allowing that space for creativity and collaborative process. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, man.
Yeah,
I mean, my experience in, going through Morse code with that was there was a collaborative writing process from the get-go between me and Travis Nicholson, my co-writer, and who ended up directing it. And what ended up happening was that the person, whoever felt strongest about this particular question, won. And I think that usually it worked out for the best in that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to give any spoilers for Black Belt, so I'm not gonna be too specific about this, but there's the climactic moment in that is a physical action that takes place, and it's really well done. It's cool, and like one of the challenges of filmmaking is it being a visual medium is like a lot of times if you're watching Succession or something, there's very little physical anything that's happening. It's a drama that's played out in conversations. And I mean, I loved Succession and no harm, no foul there. But a lot of movies aren't like that. And you could make an argument that it's more artful to use the medium in such a visual way. And you did it in that film. And my question is, without giving that away, because we want people to watch this, how was that tricky to execute that? And was that something that you had in mind from the beginning, or Xavier had in mind, or?
No, actually what happened, I think this was during COVID, during the lockdown. There's a guy, his name is Jason Wilson. I think he's in Philadelphia, and he mentors Black boys, Black youth through martial arts. And there was this one video that was like circulating around where, so it's this young kid and him, and he's trying to get him to do this maneuver, this exercise, and the kid has basically run up and get pushed back and just keep doing it until he can like push through Jason, right? And it was like viral for a minute, and it's sort of like I watched it, and then it got like stuck in the brain somewhere. And as we were writing, Karis, my fiance, actually brought it up again, and I watched it, and I was like, man, that's like a special moment. Like this kid, I'm basically gonna give it away. This kid is like running into the arms of this big Black man, being pushed away, being scared, crying, and then having to do it over and over again. And I remember being young and being in those situations where, like a father figure would take you out into the backyard and tell you like, boys don't cry and toughen up and, all that jazz. And it was something about that moment, just seeing like this kid cry and Jason say like, it's okay. Like, let your emotions out, let the tears out, let it flow. Like, it's okay to cry. There was something about that stuck with me. And as we were writing, I was like, I know I want to do a form of that. I want to try to emulate that feeling, and it not be through words. It be through like physical contact. Yeah. And so, like I wrote it in there, and everyone loved it. Everyone could see it very like clearly in their head, even when it was in the script form. And then when we got to shoot it, man, it was such a like cool and like emotional moment.
Yeah.
It was the last scene that we filmed. It was a 5-day shoot, so it was the last scene on the 5th day. It was probably about midnight when we did it. And my main actor, Seth Carr, I could tell, so he's a teenager in film. I could tell he was like preparing for it all day, because day 1 through 4, he was like being a super teen. Like I felt so silly sometimes because I would try to direct him, and he would like hear me, but then he would go off and play video games and then come do the take and be like perfect. So I'm like, all right, I don't even need to really direct this guy. Like I'm just gonna let him do what he does. So but this 5th day, he kept asking. He was like, hey Spence, when are we doing that scene? When are we doing that one again? I was like, yeah, it's coming up. It's gonna be a little bit later, but it's coming up. And I just remember that moment. He came up to me. He was like, hey Spence, is this the scene? Is this the hug? And I was like, yeah, man, this is it. This is the one. Just do it here. And we did the scene, and he just nailed it. I mean, I was like in tears on the set watching it happen, like real time.
Yeah.
And everyone that watched it, as we edited the film, everyone that watched it, they were in tears at that moment. So I was like,
I mean, I feel like it's a pretty great pitch, y'all, for checking out Black Belt on Disney Plus to see this moment. That's fantastic. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but there's kind of 2 tracks for directors. There's like writer directors, and there's just directors. And I think of you as a writer director.
Oh, thank you.
Is that fair? I don't want to, make you.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Well, all I mean by that is just that a lot of directors who want a career in the film business aren't interested in actually writing the thing.
I think it goes back and forth for me, just because part of writing the past films was just out of necessity. Like I needed something to direct, and I had stories that I wanted to tell. So I just sat my ass down and wrote, that was just the way that it was. So I do accept that. But I know that there are so many more talented. I mean, you're an amazing writer. Like even the stuff that you post on IG, I'm like reading the stories and like following it. So like, there's so many more talented writers than me. I do it out of necessity.
Well, I think we all do it out of necessity. I don't know. Does anyone want to write? I don't know the answer to that question. I do, but it's a complicated love affair.
Yeah. Well, you do it. You're great, man.
Well, that's very nice of you to say, and I accept that, and I'm grateful for that, and encouraged by that. And I also notice. I do it every day.
Yeah.
And in doing that, and I read a lot. I read screenplays a lot. We watch a lot of movies, and it's just so interesting to notice what you start to go like, oh, I kind of do this better than that. This feels more like a natural muscle to me. And so for me, the screenplay thing is not my most preferred modus operandi. Because of the strictures of screenplay writing and how tight it has to be.
Yeah.
I learned this from doing Morse Code. And even like we went through probably 30 edits of the script that ended up being shot. And then once it was shot, we cut 4 minutes out of the script because it was just like, oh, this is totally redundant and unnecessary.
Yeah. And
it was amazing to me to see that and have it be so obvious and be like, oh, how did I not see that in the writing?
Yeah.
So, I'm new at the game for sure, but I've talked about this with another I think it was a writer earlier, but there's an author that I read a collection of short stories of. I won't drop his name now because maybe I can get him on the pod someday. Fantastic collection. Just like virtuosic kind of writing and just like the flavor of his sentences and the characters. So interesting. Like this is overused, but like words dancing on the page is sort of applies to this guy. And then he most recently was the screenwriter for a film, not Dope Sick, but Kyle, what was that movie that I'm thinking of that came out on Netflix? I mentioned it before, and I'm trying to think of the actress's name. She's Emily Blunt was the star of it, and it's about the pharmaceutical companies. Anyway, Kyle will look it up and maybe and let me Pain Hustlers. And so they're like there's this movie. It was bought at Cannes for like 50 million to the script alone or something like that. These figures, use them loosely. Snopes, you can feel free to look that up and verify it. And so it had all this hype. They make the movie. Emily Blunt, big star. And when you watch it, and it's just like it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting to see a guy that's like undeniably talented.
Yeah.
And that's just like maybe that medium wasn't quite right. You know. I think about this all the time because what makes movies so like great movies great, and I'm like a child of the 80s, and so I love like the Spielberg films, the Lucas films. The Indiana Jones movies are so great because they're so fun.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not about dancing words. It's about moments that happen and how they connect to characters.
Yeah.
And it's such a different kind of writing. Like if you look at a Quentin Tarantino script, it's like punctuation, syntax errors all over the place. It's just like word vomit in moments. Yeah. And it's all because, you know, like the script is like a means to an end.
Yeah.
And it's just such a different thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think for me, my love of movies always goes back to being lost for like an hour and a half or 2 hours in the theater. That's what I want to feel when I watch a movie. Don't get me wrong. I love like a dialogue heavy film every now and then, but for me, movies are such a visual medium, and I don't want to say it's best served that way, but I think that there is something to be said about the visual language, letting that be the thing that sort of brings you in. Carries the movie. Right. So yeah, I always talk about like just the wonder and awe of movies. Like for me, I think the reason that I tell stories and the reason that I make movies is I'm just trying to connect to like the feelings that I felt like as a kid watching movies, right? Like I'm sort of the same. Like I grew up on like the popcorn flicks. Like my mom always had like we had like Little Giants and Jurassic Park and Forrest Gump, so like the big ticket movies. And I just remember like listening to the scores and feeling these big moments of like swelling music and performances and just being lost for a couple hours watching this thing on the TV or in the theater.
Yeah, it like envelops.
Yeah. And so I love stories that can do that, you know.
Yeah.
I think trying to think of the last movie that I felt that way.
I've been trying to think about it too. What you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the last really fantastic movie I saw.
Furiosa was kind of fun. Yeah, I felt like I got lost in that a little bit.
The new
Mad
Max.
Yeah.
Cool.
That was kind of fun.
I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Write it down right now.
Yeah, it's not very dialogue heavy. Just a fun ride, you know.
Yeah. The Road to Fury.
Yeah,
that movie was so like talk about a visual film.
Yeah,
like,
feast.
And I wouldn't say that movie like took me. I mean, it was another world and you're living in it. And but I wasn't like, oh my God, I was sad when I left the theater. I've had experiences where I was sad when I left the theater. I didn't want it to be over. That wasn't that quite, but the visual circus of the film, like the splendor of the display of the characters and like when they're tooling across the desert and the guys on the electric guitar playing I mean, it's just like so fun, that world. So props.
Adrenaline rush for 2 hours.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll have to check out Furioso.
It's fun, man. It's fun. It's a good easy watch.
Randa, my wife Randa is an actor, and sometimes she's in an acting class right now, and so she'll have like a scene study, and so we'll like use that as an excuse to watch a film.
Yeah, and
we watched this old. I mean, it's just like Kevin Costner. Thank you, Corby, for finding the name. It's just never there. But this Kevin Costner film about golf, and it had Rene Russo, and it's not. It's a 90s film, and it's after Field of Dreams. It's probably after Waterworld, which is a hugely famous flop. But it's like a Tin Cup. And not a great movie, not like an uneven movie. And even from a writing perspective, I'm like, interesting choice for the resolution, for the climactic moment, how they play that out. I'm like, that's a kind of amazing that made it through all the people that had to sign off, because big risk. And I think it kind of fails. I think it sort of ruins the movie.
Yeah.
He's so fantastic in it. But my point is that like these old films, and I mean, maybe this is the case in new films as well, but like even in a kind of a bad movie, there's these moments of like, if it's performance or concept that still like kind of shimmer a little bit. Like that movie's not great, but he's great.
Yeah.
He's great in it. And he basically just plays Kevin Costner.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
Anyway, that was a recent film.
Yeah.
But okay, so you're a writer director, young man, and so how is it going now? Are you working on a project? You're directing a film right now that we talked about at the very beginning of this pod.
Yeah.
Rewind to review. But apart from that project, what are you working on right now that you care to share?
Yeah, I think the thing that is like sort of like gnawing at my spirit, the story that's gnawing at my spirit is the stage of life that I'm in, and we've talked about this before we started recording, but just aging parents. I think that's sort of like a topic that, well, I'm going into that stage in my life. My mom is 75, and you tend to see your parents as like superheroes your entire life, and then there's this moment that kind of switches the perspective of them, and you see them as just needing a lot more help, and physical strength is declining. So, but I'm writing a story. It's fairly simple and kind of silly, but also I think it can really like dig deep if I can get it there, it'll dig deep. But my mom, so this Filipino woman, 75, she's a hoarder. And I'm thinking back to her first trip to Los Angeles. This was a couple of years ago, right? She's been all over the world, but for some reason she hadn't gone to Los Angeles. But at our house in LA, Karis and I, we use paper towels for everything, right? Like we just, if there's a spill, paper towel, dust, paper towel, everything. My mom flies into LA. I pick her up. She gets in the car and she's like laughing and joking. She's pulling like random snacks out of her purse, like stuff that you wouldn't get at the airport. I mean, it's like a weird trail mix of like goldfish and like the little hazelnut chocolates, the Ferrero Rochers or whatever they are.
Yeah,
It's just like a mix of stuff, right? And so anyway, like we get to the house and she loves tea, so I make her a cup of tea and she spills a little bit and she's like, "Could you give me a napkin?" And I'm like, "Mom, we don't like here, just I bring her a paper towel. Like, here, use that." She's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's a paper towel. Like, just wipe it up." She's like, I use napkins. Like at my house, I use napkins. And I'm like, "Mom, you're at my house. She lives in Charlotte. You're not in Charlotte. You're at my house." She goes downstairs, disappears for a little bit, and comes back up with an unopened pack of table napkins. So I'm like, where did you get that? Like, where did that come? She's like, I sometimes you want what you want, and I just brought them from Charlotte. So she brought an unopened pack of table napkins, and I go downstairs and I look at her luggage, and there's like just random shit in there. She had like cleaning supplies. Like there's more like cleaning supplies and like, you know, table napkins than there are clothes in her luggage. She's staying for like 2 weeks. I'm like, "Mom, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this?" So anyway, I'm sort of toying with this idea of just like, you know, you see your parents a certain way, they do certain things, but by the end of the trip, I take her back to the airport, and you know, I tell her I love her. I give her to the wheelchair assist, and I'm leaving, and I'm like in tears, you know, because you try to like fit all the things that you want to say in life to your parent in like that little moment of like I love you and see you later. And then I get back to the house and I'm eating dinner, and then I'm like using table napkins instead of paper towels. So, and I was just doing it unconsciously. So I'm like, I'm toying around with this idea of table napkins and like just that exchange of like influence and power between, you know, parent and child. So
Do you think that do you think that she like came around to seeing anything your way during that trip?
Um,
Not that that's important or anything.
maybe. I think over time, she. So just to give you context, like we grew up very small family. My mom came to the States in the 80s. She was alone. She still doesn't have family here in the States, but she married my dad. My dad passed when I was around 5. So we grew up sort of disconnected from her own family and my family here in the States. So we were pretty much alone for a long period of time, and life was pretty much survival for like a big chunk of time. And so um she, me and my sister and her, she's like focused on like how to, make money and provide. She works super hard, but I think her life became so focused on survival that she sort of let go of just like the little pleasures of life, like going to a concert or like going on a walk or having a nice dinner. So I think over time, like she's seen me and my sister sort of like our lives have sort of like opened up a little bit more. And like when I bring her to LA, I always try to like involve her in like little things that sort of like say, hey mom, these are things that you can do, right? Um so I feel like there's some exchange there. She is notorious for knowing more rap songs and rap lyrics than I know. Like she'll bring up a random artist that I haven't even heard a song of this person, and she'll just like know the lyrics. And I'm like, what are you listening to at the house? Like, how are you finding these things? So I think there's some transference, but I can't pinpoint one exact.
That's
thing.
another funny wrinkle for the story.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna
She
include
knows
it.
more raps.
Yeah, like you just will randomly. She's got like joke books. She'll tell like a random. They're terrible jokes. She'll just
No doubt.
Yeah, just give like she'll watch, or she used to watch Ellen a lot and would always write down the joke that she had on the show, and then she would call me. She was like, "Hey, Spencer, listen to this." And I'm like, "I know what you're doing, but she's like, just some off. I can't even remember some of the awful jokes that she's had, but it's just funny to hear her go down that.
I mean, I guess
train of
it's no
thought.
different than sending the memes to your friends. It's just
Yeah.
like the older school version of that.
Right.
You and Karis have been in LA now for 3 years, I want to say.
Yeah. Well, total time. So we did come back to Nashville for a chunk of time to work on a project, but I think we're coming up on 5 actually.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to know, how life in LA is, but maybe we could preface that by saying, do you think it's important to your career as a writer director to live in LA, or how important, or do you have any advice for somebody who's thinking about moving to LA or New York or versus staying in their own community?
Yeah. Pretty simple actually. I would say the biggest thing is move to LA if you really want to move to LA. It's I don't know, I've always viewed it pretty simple. Like if you're not like working on your life outside of filmmaking, then you're going to come to LA, you're going to knock on the door of the industry, you're probably going to get shut out for an extended amount of time, and then you're going to hate being in LA, right? You have to enjoy the place that you live. Like Karis and I, we wanted to live in LA. So even though, we are connected to the industry, we try to like experience the town and the surrounding areas in a way that allows us to forget about the film industry, right? Because you get there and it can be very like, it's just like a very small circle, and it's like so filmmaking centric and so filmmaking focused that you tend to forget that life exists outside of that thing. So go there. If you want to live in LA, go there and plan to experience the city, nature. Go to San Diego, go to San Francisco, go to Carmel, like do things outside of the filmmaking industry so that you feel like you have a full life. Do you need to go to LA? That's always a tough question. I think it's like yes and no. If you want to like make it to a certain level in the industry, I think you have to spend time there because you have to connect with executives and agents and things like that. But if you're just like one to, live in a new place, I'd say do it, like
Yeah.
experience it,
I think that's really sound advice, man.
I try to
Move
keep it
to
simple.
LA if you want to move to LA.
Yeah. I mean, be prepared for, higher prices, and it's a big city. So, things happen and there's a lot going on.
But you don't think that the compromise of, the amount of time spent in your car versus opportunity is on balance like a deal breaker. You guys still manage to live a life.
Yeah, you figure out
Where are you at in LA?
we're in near Burbank.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So and we moved over to Burbank because we wanted to be closer to the studios during the Launchpad program. So we're like 10 minutes from there, and I knew I was going to be spending a lot of time up there. But since then, we were like, oh, when we first landed in LA, we were in Silver Lake. Love Silver Lake. Moved over to Burbank. Definitely like slower pace, more suburban, not as much to do, but we kind of like it because you can get into the craziness of LA and then get out and like go home and not hear like helicopters all night and like police sirens and stuff. So, I think we found our little pocket that we like for the moment. We do want to get back on the other side, but right now Burbank works,
Mhm.
But yeah, like I think you just gotta prepare. Well, I will say this. Um, if you're moving there, put an emphasis on finding community, because that is, it can get clicky, and it can get very lonely if you aren't actively like meeting new people and trying to get into certain circles or creating your own circle. That's what a lot of people do. They just move out there and they'll start markets and film groups and running groups, or like let's go hiking. Like I think you have to be focused on creating that community for you if you already don't have friends there or like an existing network.
It's not going to happen on its own.
It's
You're not
not
going to
gonna
meet
happen.
somebody at the grocery store and be like, "Hey, cool," and all of a sudden he's coming over for dinner.
Yeah, yeah. I had coffee with a DP friend a couple weeks ago, and she sort of said it best. It's like you have to force people to hang with you enough times so that it becomes like normal, and then you're not thinking about it after that. Because everyone is like trying to figure out the next big career goal. No one's like really focused on like hanging out, but you have to be intentional about it and say like, hey, you're coming to coffee with me, or you're going to this Sparks game with me, or we're gonna check out this market. Just come hang for an hour and like let's be friends before we try to focus on making films.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people get overwhelmed, whether they're in LA or New York or really anywhere, with this seemingly impossible tension between achieving, creating opportunities for yourself. Then also the prerequisite for that is creating something, if you're a writer, that's worthy of attention.
Mhm.
So there's two impossible things that you don't have enough time for. And then on top of it, like your mental health, like actually living and not waking up one day 20 years later and being like, I didn't quite make it the way I thought I would, and I don't have any friends.
Yeah.
And I'm 50. Or I think that's really challenging. And so it sounds like that piece of just that you just shared about kind of being proactive and creating community, I think is applicable to anywhere that you live.
Yeah.
But it definitely, the more competitive the environment, the more required it is of you to be proactive.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll also say this. I mean, it is a competitive town, but you will run into a lot of people that are very like open and excited to like meeting new people, sharing contacts, just working on projects. I think, recently I've started to fall into circles where folks just want to make films and not think about the end result of the film. Like they're not aiming to get it into a festival or like pitch it somewhere at some studio. That's like the thing that I miss. So in comparison to Nashville, the thing that I have missed is just getting with a group of friends and like, fumbling around trying to make something,
Yeah.
seeing who can come help for an hour or two, Um, that is a piece of Nashville that I like hold on to because this town is like where I sort of cut my teeth on all of this stuff. Like I remember before Nashville had its like big boom, I knew like this city so so intimately because I would take my little Canon T2i and just run around downtown filming buildings and filming people and like calling friends and saying, like, "Hey, let's just make this little film in this alleyway." Like I was notorious for doing that, just trying to find like the cool spots of town. And I
It's such a
missed that.
great way to spend your youth.
I mean, it was like it was so good and you just learned so much. And I do miss that because, in LA,
You don't have time.
oh, you don't have time.
Yeah.
You really don't have time. And everywhere is so crowded. Everywhere is so busy. Like people are moving, doing things. You try to lock in crew, but they're doing this big project here or doing this thing there. So that's the piece that I miss from Nashville is just like the freedom to just go out there and make something with no care as to who's seeing it or the end result. Yeah.
It is such an advantage to living in I'll call it a secondary market. You could say. When you were talking about that, I was just thinking about like I'm in my 40s now, and having been pursuing an independent, creative, forward career for a long time, and I have made my peace several different chapters in my life from surrendering some of the freedom in exchange for focus.
Yeah.
And when I was a really young man, before like I had my first band in college that really like kind of turned a corner for me. But when I was like in college, I remember thinking consciously like this is the time to just go to take some wide swings.
Yeah.
Because you're probably not going to die.
Yeah.
And you'll have a great story.
Yeah.
And I really did that. That part of that life was me. Like, I remember one spring break when I was 20, maybe 21. I was having a crisis, and I imagined likely, self-imposed likely. And at that time I had like a 69 VW bus. It was a car I inherited in high school. Yeah. And I drove it down to southern Utah from Washington, which was a 2-day drive straight pretty much. And then I had like no plan. So I just drove, like I got to very near the Canyonlands, which is a national park. And I just drove as far down a dirt road as I possibly could until it just died.
No fear.
and then I parked the car, and then my only plan was to hike more than 1 day's drive away from the car in a canyon. And so, and this is where it gets really youth stupid. But I also, because I was really into these vision quest things. I was super into Native American lore, and also there's a book that I have that, like Himalayan callings of like Westerners going to the West. I was like a big fan of like Ram Dass in high school and stuff. And so I was like, I'm going to bring 5 oranges and a gallon of water. And that's all I'm going to bring. And I went out, and I seriously camped for 5 days out in the Canyonlands when I was 21 years old. And it was not pleasant. I was like, the third day, I was like, what the fuck am I doing out here? And I still had a whole day's walk to even get back to the car. And I still was like, I hope the van's still there. You're rolling the dice a lot when you're a young man. But it's just like,
I feel so like terrified, like hearing this story. I'm like,
I would never do that now. I would never do that now. I mean, like when I was the town that I grew up in, this little town in Idaho called Twin Falls. It's on the southern side of a major geologic feature, the Snake River Canyon. Yeah. And it's where Evel Knievel tried to jump the canyon in the 70s. Okay. You're too young to even probably, that doesn't ring a bell, I'm sure. But the bridge that connects my little town to everywhere else called the Prime Bridge. And it's like a big arch bridge. It's got a technical name. But it's more recently, its claim to fame is like the #1 base jumping bridge. But anyway, the arch part of that bridge that's on which the whole road, the flat road part sits, is like connected by, it's probably about a foot wide, and it's got like it's a catwalk of a thing. And then every time you get to like a vertical pillar, you kind of have to walk around it. And it's 500 feet off the ground. And when I was in high school, it was a pastime for me and my friends, sober and not, to sneak down, climb down the canyon. It's just totally illegal to do it. And then climb up the 40 feet to get to the start of the catwalk, and then just walk across the catwalk. Yeah. And I mean, the cops were involved sometimes. And we just do this all the time. And when I was like in my teens, there's nobody could tell me nothing. And you're definitely like immortal when you're that young. Right. And I remember when I moved to Nashville, I was about 30. And that drive taking me there when I was living in Seattle, the first night I spent in my hometown, and I thought, like for sentimental purposes, I'm gonna do that. As I got up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I drive down, park in the parking lot, and hike down to the canyon. I'm like, it's all coming back to me, and I climb up the ladder, and the wind's whistling, and you can hear like cooing of pigeons like in the rafters, and every time a semi comes over, the whole thing shudders, and I get to the part, and it's like time to begin, and you're already like super, super death fall at the time. And I was just like, there is no effing way I'm going to do this right now. Not a chance in a million years. And it's just like funny to see when that stuff changes. Yeah. Anyway, that was too much of a detour. But like the point being, like now in my time and place, I noticed that I spend a lot of time considering my moves before I make my moves. Whereas when I was young, there's very little consideration, because I was just like, I'll work it out in the end, because I had time on my side. Right. And but now it's like, there's a question I'm always asking myself. It's like, and it's not like formally, but it's just like sort of in my unconscious. It's like, what is the thing that I can best bring to the table? Mm-hmm. Given my limited experience and talents, mm-hmm. how best can I make something in the world? And like, I used to think that when I was much younger, I was like, I can play guitar, I can sing, I can write songs. Mm-hmm. And I remember one time an A&R guy was like, yeah, but what is it? What do you do best of those things? Right. And I was like, I'm not going to choose. Yeah. And that wasn't the right answer. The right answer was, of all those three things, songwriting was the thing that I was best at. Yeah. And there's still people we've had guests on here that are master songwriters, Hall of Fame songwriters. And I'm like, I'm still learning that piece, but all this to say, it's like, I think that it's an okay trade, and it's a necessary trade. And I think that we all along our journey have to make this concession with reality. That is like, what do we do best of all of those things? And being young is about learning that, right? Right. And at some point, if you're not a complete doofus, you see it, and you do. I mean, I think everybody sees it eventually, like right. Because you are rewarded or denied, or and it's like life kind of has a way of like helping you get to where you're going.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think like you put it best. I tend to think of it just in like, if this is the center of you, the more things that you try to do, you're like pulling away from your center. So like for me, I love that you said I'm a writer director. I just think that I'm, a better director than I am a writer. But the times that I got like too far out of myself, that's where I felt like the work didn't show up the way that I wanted it to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it always, for me right now, it's about like pulling myself back together to figure out what thing I do best, and just focus on that and make like the best work that I can out of that centered person. Because everything that I've done, and I think I've gotten to this point in my career just by like making things and not focusing on the industry and not focusing too much on like who's going to see it. It's just been like, I feel something, I'm going to do it. But the moment that I step out into this person that's trying to be this, director on social media, and this, chasing down this agent over here, I'm like stretching myself in a way that doesn't feel natural. Mm-hmm. And it's just about like bringing myself back to here, mm-hmm. and creating from that space, because people will notice it, when you do it from here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I totally agree.
There's so much power in operating from the center.
Yeah.
And trusting that. And it's so difficult not to, you see what's working for this person over here. And you're like, maybe I should spend a whole bunch of time doing a bunch of content on this thing and get a bunch of followers. Or it's like, well, maybe you should if that's what you want to do.
Right.
But if that's not where you want to go, then don't go there.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to trust that you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
if it's difficult to trusting yourself.
Yeah.
But,
hardest thing to do.
Yeah. Spencer, man, thank you so much for spending some time with us. This has been great. Fantastic conversation.
Sometimes I just ramble.
You know what? I got a lot out of it, and that's mostly what matters here.
Love it. Dude, thank you.
Yeah, man. Everybody check out Black Belts on Disney Plus and follow Spence on the gram. And what's the next thing that's going to be coming out? Is this, the movie that you're directing right now? Is going to come out in Austin as well?
Be out in Austin. And
what's it called?
October. Amongst the Large Pines.
Amongst the Large Pines.
So it's a fun one. Just a horror short film. I've like grown to love like horror. I was a scaredy cat. I've been a scaredy cat all my life. Yeah. But now I like doing these little horror projects.
It's the most, fun. I feel like it lends itself really well to filmmaking.
It's like a different muscle. Fun. It's just like fun to get in there and do it. So
everybody loves blood.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and click here to like and subscribe. You can click right there to watch another video or click here to watch a playlist featuring songs of the Morse Code podcast. Okay, thank you very much.